Good morning, and I welcome you back to the House of Graphic Literature. And I was very happy to see the very positive turnout for my last video covering Tsuge Yoshiharu. And in that video, I mentioned that I would also be interested in discussing his brother, Tsuge Tadao. And that time is now. And the thing about Tsuge Tadao is that he doesn't have nearly as much as his brother published at the moment, which sucks because Tadao's work is arguably just as interesting, if not more in some ways. And I'm hoping by the end of this video, you'll understand what I mean by that. Because there truly kind of is no one like Tadao Tsuge at the moment. But we need to start from the very beginning with this collection right here. Trash Market, put out by Drawn and Quarterly. And this was the first Tadao Tsuge collection released back, I forgot whenever this was released, 2015, yeah. So, took us a lot longer to get Tadao's work, and a lot less like Yoshiharu, in that his work is already fairly experimental. Like, Yoshiharu was he came out of like Kashihon and all that jazz. And Tadao did a little bit of that too, but mainly whenever he broke into manga, he started with already very abstract, kind of unsettling stories. And that's just kind of where he would stay for most of his career. This book, Trash Market, collects all of his early work from Gado. And he and Yoshiharu kind of broke into Gado around the same time. And if you look at these early stories that Tadao did, they do kind of call to mind Yoshiharu in a way. But they also call to mind Tatsumi, who I mentioned in the last video. And that's because, Tatsumi was a pretty massive influence. He was a massive influence to anyone who wanted to create Gekiga in this era. But the thing about Tadao compared to Yoshiharu is that his staging feels like so cinematic. Like Yoshiharu has a great sense of panel composition, but Tadao kind of feels like he's actually moving a camera around in a way. It's really interesting. I really love, especially with the later stories, how abstract his figures kind of get. Like, it's still a person, but, the pieces are a little bit different. This definitely calls to mind Tsuge's story, specifically Oba. But yeah, it's interesting. Tadao's first main story that he ever did for Gado was just this dude kind of comparing himself and learning about Van Gogh. It's a quaint little story, though. I really love the lettering in this collection. That's one of my favorite parts about this. I don't know who the letterer was on this, but they did a really excellent job. Still kind of in that Tatsumi looking era. This story's really disturbing because it's just kind of it's just a domestic conflict all throughout. And it kind of sets a tone for what Tadao's stories are going to be. Because it kind of calls to mind like this very, very dirty, unsettling, disturbing in many ways, just vibe that kind of throws you off. And it's really interesting how he went from this kind of fun, simple story about Van Gogh, and then you transition straight into like this domestic conflict that feels like it goes on for an uncomfortable amount of time. There's abuse in here. There's just a lot of stuff that would hit close to home for some people. Manhunt. Now this story, I gotta have that up. This story is whenever Tadao kind of finds his style. Everything is a lot less Tatsumi-like. The story is actually not my favorite in this collection, but it's definitely one of my favorites. But yeah, as you can see, he's leaning more into like kind of realistic features. I love the way that the glasses on this dude kind of reflect the light. It's really interesting. There's another story that we're going to be discussing that kind of uses a lot of the same visual cues as this one. This I love this though, because it's the witness sort of recounting what he saw, and you get just these really amazing shots. It's really cool seeing like a train like this, because I feel like whenever you see a Gekiga author draw a train, it's always going to be the fucking Tatsumi train. So it's cool that it's a more traditional engine. But yeah, this is whenever the abstraction of backgrounds start to become a part of Tadao's bag of tricks. Again, still kind of moving that camera around. I can show that, fuck it. This dude has just the most bizarre face. He's really good at that. He's really good at giving people these very strange faces. Gently goes the night. These are normally the kind of protagonists that you'll see in Tadao's stories, just like these. Oh, look at that. There's that Graphomania that I mentioned. You're going to be seeing a lot more of that as this goes along. But yeah, there's like these like glasses, middle-aged dudes. This is phenomenal right here. I love how you can just like, again, another very Tatsumi looking figure. Actually, that's more Yoshiharu, but I just really love how these look. And I like how the Graphomania is almost used to show the transition between memories and present day. The way this story plays out, this dude just kind of has nothing going on at all. in his whole life. And he's trying to sort of get over his, I don't want to say he's trying to get over his PTSD, but he's just like, he's so connected to the mindset that he had, of being stuck in the war that he didn't really get to enjoy his youth. And so he meets this young girl and tries to sort of have something with her, but it really doesn't work out. And then you have the lady from the cover, of course, flipped. Yeah, this is whenever I think Tadao's stories start to be very much based in, like, human adult desire. The scene starts out very disturbing, but then it kind of gets lighter as it goes along. Now, this is probably the most interesting story in this whole volume right here. A Tale of Absolute and Utter Nonsense, which is interesting. There is no backgrounds. It's basically just two guys talking back and forth, and they're all looking for some sort of retribution, planning some sort of revolution. All these ideas that sort of end up going wayside and just resulting in a lot of mindless violence. And the thing about this story is that this was actually very much inspired by the student protests of this era. So much so that the end of this story, there's a panel that actually had to be censored in the original Garo release because it depicted a real life, whether it be advisor or minister of sorts. But despite the dark feel of this story, there's also it's also a showcase of how dynamic Tadao's art is, and it also sort of shows his penchant for street fighting, which is in a lot of his work. There you go. That's the panel that got censored. And the final story is the title story, Trash Market, which basically is the story that completely sets the tone for the next volume that came out after this. Because it's basically just really strange, bizarre guys hanging outside of a blood bank waiting to get their blood drawn, and it's really something that you just gotta read for yourself. But it's a good representation of, like, the kind of stories that Tadao would become known for. Stories about the destitute, about the lower income society, slum life of Japan. And the reason for that is because that's kind of how he grew up. He really wasn't living in luxury or anything. But unlike his brother, he really didn't travel very much. Just kind of stayed in the same area for quite some time because he had no choice. Um, and these are actually, I'm really glad that these were included. These are actual excerpts by the author that was released in like a youth magazine, including pieces of art that he drew to go along with it to explain a lot of the stories here. And it's maybe the best part of this volume. And then there's also a nice Holmberg essay at the back. Yeah, there's what I mentioned about the panel getting censored. And this right here, this is one of my favorite Garo covers. Big fan of that one. And that's one of Yoshiharu's Kashihon. So that's Trash Market. Not long after Trash Market, this was released. Slum Wolf. But this one was released by New York Review. More or less the same sort of idea as Trash Market. But these stories are a lot more poignant, a little bit more action-packed, and this is legitimately one of my favorite volumes in my collection. Not only does it show amazing artistry, but the stories are so fun to read in this volume. Even if many of them are depressing as hell, they are really excellent. And I appreciate it because the story starts out with just a dude, and they're talking about this Billy Badass that they once knew, named Sabu, which is a motif. Sabu is a character that Tadao will use throughout his work. Basically, all throughout this material. But there's one book here, two books actually. There's Boat Life, which I'll discuss in a minute, and then there's Sabu the Bruiser, which was a short story that he did and was published by Black Hook Press. And unfortunately, it is the most rare, one of the most rare Gekiga English releases ever, and so that's why I don't own it. The story is phenomenal. It has a great, it has a really great conclusion too. But yeah, Sabu is a very real life motif because Tadao knew a guy, or allegedly knew of a guy named Sabu who was the Billy Badass of the town. Always got into fights, always was standing his ground, and but that's how he remembers him. And so in using that, he creates these other characters named Sabu who are in the memory, in the image of that guy. But there's no real clear parallel as to if he really was like that or not. And that's because, I mean, he knew of this guy whenever he was still a youngin'. By this point, he's a lot older. One of my favorite Tadao panels ever. These are really thick volumes. A lot thicker compared to the Yoshiharu volumes, and so that's why this one is taking me a little bit longer to get through. Another story that I fucking love. This one right here. It really allows Tadao to play with shadow, with mood, lighting. dynamic movement. It's just some really phenomenal pieces in here. And it's just about this dude who got too drunk and doesn't know where he's heading. And there you go, there's the cover. He just gets lost in a back alley. Comes across this girl, which is funny. These two actually look very similar to the characters from the last volume, and I feel like that's just a Tadao thing. A lot of his characters look the same, no matter what. The story's really interesting, and it's followed up kind of in another volume that we're going to be talking about. It has a very similar vibe. But yeah, this is whenever the street life motifs are just increased tenfold. Because by this point, Tadao was fully established, and I mean, this is just what he's known as. This story is great too. Basically, every story in this collection is great. Like I said, this is one of my favorite volumes in my whole collection. I'm a big fan of this one. I love how this character looks like a Seiichi Hayashi drawing. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but if it is, it's great. But yeah, there's so much street fighting in these too, which is really fun. I love seeing a good scrap. Even if it is like these like dark blobs that like vaguely resemble humans stumbling around. It's good stuff, man. This feels like a direct follow-up, but it's actually about a different character. Namely this guy, who reminds me of fucking David Carradine. Don't tell me you don't see it. But yeah, this one's about a literal wolf rather than the other wolf. That's a very Tatsumi character right there. Bum mutt. I love the negative space that Tadao implores into his work. They never mention anything about him owning a dog, but I like to think that Tadao owned a dog. Because he writes a lot of stories about wolves or dogs and shit of that nature. The story's hilarious, by the way. So, this is probably the most interesting story in this collection, because this actually went on to be made into a film. Something that I didn't mention in the last video is that a lot of Yoshiharu's work was adapted to film. The Man of Gensen-kan in Nejishiki. I think even the name is not coming to me right now. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of his work was adapted into film, and it was normally avant-garde, kind of low-budget cinema. But Vagabond Plane was directed by Ishiteruo, a very established director by this point. And it's I haven't seen it myself, but the way that Tadao describes it is that it's a lot tighter, it's a lot more cinematic, I guess would be the way to put it. Even though this story is probably the most cinematic story that Tadao has done thus far, he really kind of leaned more into like the sort of like Yakuza midnight thriller kind of feel, which this story doesn't really have much of that at all. But it's I will say, even before I read the essay at the end of this book, I was like, this would make a great movie. And, I mean, apparently it did. I don't know how good it is, but it made a movie. So, that's something. I love the crowd shots. Tadao draws such good crowd shots, man. And all kinds of people from different walks of life. It's something really special. And the worst part about Vagabond Plane is that it doesn't have an ending. He never wrote an ending to it, so it just kind of stops. A lot of post-war struggling in this one, which is another motif that shows up in a lot of Tadao's work, is post-war occupation struggles. And here's the conclusion to the story earlier in this volume, which actually follows immediately kind of after Vagabond Plane, because you have this character who was introduced in Vagabond Plane, and then he comes in and he meets all the tenants, and they're super nice guys, and then he finds out that Ryokichi is staying here, and he's having spasms because of PTSD. And he decides that he finally needs to take out the trash, so to speak. Really great backgrounds here. I know one of the things that I mentioned a lot in the last video was that Tadao doesn't have as much of a pedigree for backgrounds as his brother does, but this story kind of proves me wrong in that regard, because the backgrounds that he draws here are really phenomenal. But yeah, probably one of the most haunting endings to a Gekiga story. But this is such a good, striking image. That's the thumbnail. Always a tough guy at heart. This is actually this is one of my favorite essays I've read in one of these, because this is more stuff from the Tsuge Tadao review, but it's him talking about all the movies that he loved growing up, like Shane and The Lonely Whistle, and what is that one film called? I can't remember. It's not coming to me. And then you got Holmberg with another great Tadao essay mentioning more about the Taro Ishii film. So, I mentioned I don't have Boat Life, and I don't have Sawa the Bruiser. What I do have, though, is Tale of the Beast, which was the unfinished serial that Tadao did for his brother's magazine and Comic Baku, and this is the second latest work that we have of Tsuge, other than, or Tadao, I should say, other than Boat Life. And this story is interesting. As I said, a lot of these stuff from Slim Wolf and Trash Market kind of feel apropos to this story. Again, just really amazing artistry on display here. Probably the most cinematic that his work looked. Even compared to Vagabond Plane, I feel. And Black Hook was a very small publisher who no longer really operates anymore. But they did really cool releases of Gekiga. The only issue with their work is that a lot of the translations are a little borked, and that is the case with this one. So it's not as fun to read, but I will say the pictures do make it well worth it. And it's still a really fun story in its own right. Because it's just kind of it's a classic tale of a guy and a girl on the run, and trying to solve a murder that they don't really understand how it happened. And something that I really love about these Black Hook Press releases, though, different color ink used for the printing. So we just had blue. Here's the black ink. I think we go back to blue somewhere later on. This is something that I really wish that modern manga reprints would do, because this is something that is straight from the magazine. Yeah, you're right back to blue, as you can see. But yeah, this probably deserves a video in of itself, just from how striking the imagery is. But as just a showcase of Tadao's work, it's probably one of the best representations we have of his artistry. And it's a real shame that the story never finished, because it could have a really cool ending, I feel. But we never got it, so it's a shame. But oh yeah, and it's one of these deals where it is printed like an actual manga out of Japan. So, and the last piece of Tsuge Tadao is in this right here, Verite. This is a half Japanese, half Indian comics anthology. There are 3 volumes of this so far. I have the first 2. And the last story in here, or the first story in here, for the manga section, is The Old Woman of Kinakoya, which is a really nice, simple, kind of depressing story about this nice old lady who gives out candy and then dies one day. It's really simple, but I think it's very effective in its storytelling. And I feel like this is very this is more trash market Tadao than it is Slum Wolf Tadao. Because it feels a lot more slice of lifey. It's not as trashy as Slum Wolf, I'd say. But it's still it's nice. It's really quaint. And I'm really glad that we got this story in print eventually. Because it's I don't know if it's one of my favorite Tadao stories, but I really do like it a lot. And it's just really nice seeing someone who normally writes like such depressing, kind of trashy material to write something a little bit more saccharine. But anyways, folks, that's gonna do it for my showcase on the other Tsuge brother. And I implore you, if you liked anything that you see here, please seek out these books. They're not that hard to find. Admittedly, Trash Market and Slum Wolf are very easy to get your hands on. Tale of the Beast might be the hardest. And Verite, I'm pretty sure you can still order that directly from Comics India. So definitely, if you liked all that, seek these out. And especially if you've only read Yoshiharu, you should really check out Tadao. I think it's worth it to get different perspectives from 2 different brothers, and it's really cool, man. I love this material a lot, and it's become one of my favorite pieces in my collection. And I really need to get Boat Life, because Boat Life seems like it's probably going to be the most interesting Tadao book thus far, because it's basically a vague self-insert story about him living on a boat and getting really depressed from that fact. So um, definitely going to be interesting to read. But with all that said, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye. Okay, so very short addendum after the video. It was just announced while I was making this that Tsuge Tadao was making another manga. I don't know whenever it's going to release, but it's going to be released through Comics Medu. I don't know why I said that like it was French. It's a Japanese website, but yeah. So our boy's still going strong. Hopefully we get this material in the future, but until then, definitely pick this stuff up because it will also show interest that could possibly lead to us getting this new material in the future as well. Also, something I forgot to mention: Boat Life Volume 2 is coming very, very soon, and so that'll finish up Boat Life, and hopefully, if that sells well, we'll start getting some of his newer stuff too, which would be awesome. Anyways, that's it. Bye bye.